In 1996, a legendary game was released. Only a year later arrived its sequel, which brought many improvements and its share of mysteries. Today, we will talk about Tomb Raider 2, starring Lara Croft. This video will not retrace the history of the development of the game but rather of Lara's adventure, an adventure that hides unsuspected secrets, some strange, others more disturbing. First of all, here is a summary of the main arc of the story as it is summarized on most websites. The story of the second Tomb Raider game surrounds the mythical dagger of Xian, a weapon which was used by an emperor of China to command his troops. By plunging the weapon into its owner's heart, the weapon gives the power to turn its bearer into a dragon. His last battle comes to an end and a warrior monk of Tibet removed the dagger, causing the death of the emperor. The dagger was returned to its resting place under the Great Wall. In 1997, near the remains of the Great Wall, Lara Croft investigates the legend of the dagger. She is attacked by a gangster who says he works for Marco Bartoli, leader of a cult called Fiamma Nera. After traveling to Venice, Lara discovers the Bartoli's hideout and an opera house, which serves as a warehouse for their thefts. Lara follows Bartoli aboard his plane, but she is knocked unconscious. The plane lands at an oil platform. The Fiamma Nera have killed the rig's staff and are carrying out excavations in a wreck of a sunken ship called the Doria, a luxury ocean liner which belonged to Marco's father. When Lara regains consciousness, she makes her way through the oil rig and retrieves her weapons. She learns from an imprisoned Tibetan monk, Brother Xian, that the ship carries an ancient Tibetan artifact called the seraph. Lara dives and grabs a submersible to discover the shipwreck. Inside, she recovers the seraph. She heads towards the Barkhang monastery in Tibet with the plane of the rig. There she helps the monks attacked by the gang of Marco Bartoli. She finds and uses prayer wheels to open a room to hold the seraph. She continues her adventure inside the catacombs to find the talion, a key used to open the door to the dagger. Exiting the ice palace, she takes off in a jeep. Several guards follow Lara, but she escapes. Back in China, Lara opens the chamber containing the dagger. Before she reaches the artifact, she is plunged into the temple of Xian. She makes her way back to the chamber, but Bartoli has used the dagger and is carried through the floating islands. Lara goes through the portal to a strange place guarded by millenarian warriors. She moves to the room where she finds Bartoli transformed into a dragon. Lara manages to pull the dagger from Bartoli's heart, killing him. The whole tomb begins to collapse, and a part of the Great Wall explodes. Lara escapes and is knocked unconscious upon landing outside the wall, but she wakes up the next day. She returns home with the dagger when an alarm goes off. The remainder of Marco Bartoli's men have tracked her down and are invading her mansion. She wins the battle. This is the story of Tomb Raider 2. It looks like an archaeological discovery. Everything begins with a clue to lead to secrets. Now that we have these elements, it is time to analyze them in detail, in order to verify that we did not miss anything. The elements should be put in context. At the time we didn't know much about Lara, except that she is a renowned archaeologist and adventurer. She's necessarily a well-known personality, because she's on the cover of a magazine from the very first game. The second game is indeed the continuation of the first because Lara specifies that she made improvements in her mansion, the boxes of her move have disappeared and her training room has been moved outside. Natla uses her to find one of the parts of the Xian belonging to Qualipec, which means that Lara is contactable. But we do not know if this contact is easy, because the mercenary who acts as intermediary is not an amateur since he is the one who ventures into the Lost Valley and who later finds the last piece of the Xian. We don't know if Lara is the best adventurer in her universe, but she's not the only one capable of roaming dangerous places. However, Lara is not a mercenary, but it is possible that people like Natla might think she is. The fact that she uses weapons is also common knowledge because she can be seen carrying her pistols on the cover of the magazine. Lara sets things straight from the first interaction by replying that she does this for sport.
I'm sorry, I only play for sport.
She's on the good side, and the game proves it when she spares Larson, who tried to kill her.
Thank you.
She also has the possibility of neutralizing Natla, and yet decides to target the Xian.
Not without the heart of the operation. No!
Lara is also incredibly rich, and the location of the Croft manor is no absolute secret since the Bartoli thugs are able to find it. The fact that she uses weapons is only a way to protect herself. It's not just a mansion, it's a training base. If the location of her residence is public, then many people may think that it harbors invaluable artifacts, justifying her being able to protect herself. This puts Lara in a situation closer to Iron Man than Batman. The main difference between the first two games is that Lara seeks the dagger of Xian by herself. It is during her adventure that she crosses paths with Marco Bartoli, who pursues the same goal. We don't know why their researches are taking place at the same time, we just know the ones of Marco are more advanced. The Fiamma Nera had time to install a zip line and a guard at the entrance. Lara does not yet know the exact location of the entrance to the Temple of Xian, which is in the basement and protected by many traps. This is why the helicopter makes it descend around the wall and not directly above it. This helicopter also means that at least one person knows where Lara is at this point. I like to think it's Winston. It is also clear that Marco's agents entered by another path because they did not set off the traps. Anyway, at the end of the first level, the guard ends his life. This guard communicates with Marco's organization through his computer installed in his makeshift camp. Breaking this contact, Marco must realize that something has happened at the entrance to the temple and that at least one intruder knows the existence of the dagger and is very close to its room. This is certainly why his guards are on alert when Lara arrives in Venice and why they open fire immediately when they have no idea who she is. This scene also shows us that Lara was unaware of Marco's organization. She discovers her lair using the computer, which displays a photo of Bartoli's villa in Venice. This photo shows the start of the third level, and you can see the symbol on the door. The same symbol that appears on the wall at the start of the second level. It is possible that Marco has known for a long time where the entrance to the temple is, and that a leak of information led Lara to him. This symbol is found throughout the game and represents the temple door once unlocked. Its meaning is open to interpretation. Here is one. The circle could be the earth. The point could be the heart. When we put the dagger in the heart, the border between the two worlds appears, and the dragon can cross it to access our world. Fiamma Nera members use this logo on all their clothing and objects. Fiamma Nera means black flame in Italian, which is logical since the headquarters of this organization is in Venice. Its former leader was Marco's father. However, nothing indicates that Gianni Bartoli is the founder of the organization. He may have simply reused the symbol and transformed the Fiamma Nera into a sect dedicated to the search for the relics of Xian, or joined an old sect that already had this goal. Gianni was also a magician at the opera house adjacent to his mansion. We can see his poster in the fourth level. It was this man who discovered the seraph and lost it at sea after being attacked by monks. Marco is only continuing the quest of his father, and we are not sure if his men know the meaning of the symbol. When Marco and Fabio leave Venice aboard the seaplane, there is no indication that they are informed of the carnage that Lara has just done in their headquarters. Their conversation concerns another subject. However, as Lara is captured before the landing, this means Marco can no longer ignore that she got on board in Venice. It is curious that she is left captive in these conditions. Was he planning to question her when she woke up? We can't find out since she escapes quickly, which triggers an alarm, so Marco knows Lara has escaped. The whole platform is on alert. The next scene is the one with Brother Chan, who thinks he is on the verge of death. He says that Lara is his guide, his pathbeater to a next incarnation. He gives her the information that his temple is in Tibet and also the indication that the seraph is the key that Marco is looking for. We also learn that his father destroyed Marco's father's ship. The quest for the dagger of Xian crosses generations. Marco Bartoli, who was listening to the conversation, decides to kill the monk, then to attack Lara. But several elements of this scene are odd to say the least. At first Marco doesn't seem to be aiming at Xian but Lara. Is his weapon so imprecise? However, he shoots 2 bullets at Xian before he collapses. When you look at the shot from another angle, we can see that he is not targeting anyone. Could it be possible that Marco is unaware that he is dealing with Lara Croft, the famous Tomb Raider? In any case, he gave her time to put on her diving suit and his shots made Lara move back towards the door, which was nevertheless closed when she arrived in the room. This door leads to the diving area just as the submarine is launched. It is suspicious that he did not take advantage of the high ground to first execute Lara, knowing the monk was injured and disarmed. Unless he skillfully took advantage of Lara to get Xian to talk. Perhaps he expected Xian to only talk about Tibet to keep Lara away from the seraph, and since he revealed too much information he needed to eliminate him as a priority. Or, he was waiting for the submarine to launch to make sure she couldn't reach the wreckage of the ship. It was also when the alarm sounded that he went on the attack, so as to camouflage the sound of his shots. Other details of this altercation are strange and lead to many interpretations. Before neutralizing the men of Bartoli, Lara overhears their conversation. Marco is the first to speak.
Blood or answers, I have no preference.
And the second responds.
Okay, Marco. Glad to have your heart.
He continues the interrogation by asking Xian where they should look in the monastery.
Tell me, where in monastery should we look?
What is weird is that in the original version of the game, this person has the same accent as Brother Xian, or at least a similar accent.
You have come for me. I saw bright lights around me.
Could it be possible that Marco collaborates with Chinese? This hypothesis is plausible because on the cover of the game in French there is mention of an Italian mafia and a Chinese mafia. Why would a translator be so mistaken as to invent a new element? In this version the interrogator has an even more powerful accent than Chang's.
Okay, Marco. Je me réjouis de vous avoir à bord.
I also checked the German and Italian versions, and both of them kept that accent as well. Why is this detail not included in the summaries? Additionally, there is further evidence that the Tibetan guards don't speak Italian in this cutscene. Just before the car crashes, we can hear a scream. The same cry as that of the Tibetan monks. I tried to figure out what this meant in Chinese by trying several variations like attack or get out of here, to no avail. Google does not allow translating the Tibetan language, but the word warning in Nepalese is similar. Also, the man in the truck, who is also on the game menu, cannot be Marco, because Marco has red eyes. That's why he wears glasses even at night. In fact, Marco did not move his men to Tibet. He obviously uses locals who are also looking to find the dagger of Xian. And this man is probably their leader. Why are the two mafias collaborating? We do not know. Maybe because the Chinese mafia has not yet spotted the entrance to the Temple of Xian, but they know that Marco has made a discovery. The interrogator may have come to see the progress of the research. When the interrogator replies, "Glad to have you aboard," it is confirmation that the Chinese mafia has made a pact with Marco, who is on the verge of obtaining the seraph. The scene of the helicopter bearing the organization symbol could belong to this man. Brother Xian was probably hiding in the helicopter and was unmasked. Chang's presence comes as a surprise, because the man with the Asian accent asks him what he wants.
What do you want?
These details are less noticeable depending on the version of the game. Most emphasize the interrogator's accent, but Chang's accent varies from language to language. In fact, if we look at the summary of the story on the internet, it varies according to our language. The English version, which is the most detailed, seems to be inspired by all the versions. Sometimes it's an offshore platform, sometimes it's an oil station, sometimes a drilling tower, sometimes the platform is in the Adriatic Sea. Sometimes we speak of 40 fathoms, sometimes 40 atmospheres of pressure, or simply depths. The Tibetan foothills are the Tibetan highlands in German, the Tibetan tracks in a few other languages, and the Tibetan hills in French, but when you translate foothill, it means the bottom of the mountain, more precisely the first small mountains near the big ones. But in Tibet the smallest mountains are already bigger than most of the mountains in the world, which makes all translations correct. I have to mention how phenomenal this cutscene is for the time of the game, the way Lara floats, the light and the refractions on the bubbles, even the music. This scene is also interesting because it gives us indications of the depth at which the wreck of the Maria Doria lies. The answer to this question can be found in the level title. It is called 40 fathoms, and fathoms are a unit of depth measurement. 1 fathom equals 1.8288 meter. 40 fathoms equals 73.152 meters. Again, this answer varies depending on the language of the game. In my native language the title is translated as, by 40 fathoms deep, because the fathom is also the translation of the unit of measurement of depth in French. But it's also the same word that used for breaststroke swimming, the type of swimming that Lara does, so I thought the depth was what Lara could reach in 40 strokes. In reality, a fathom corresponds to the span of the arms, from the tips of the fingers from one hand to the other. Sailors submerged a plummeted line and hauled it up from the bottom by counting the number of wingspan needed, thus obtaining the depth in number of fathoms. The interesting point is not only that the game developers knew about this unit of measurement, but that this depth matches what we can see in the cutscene. At the start, we can still see the surface and everything seems to go smoothly. At the end of the sequence, Lara can still make out the light, which must place her at about 100 meters deep. Another indication is the presence of barracudas, which are fish that live near reefs, and these live around 30 meters deep and can reach a depth of 100 meters. The submarine descends to about 1 meter per second for 56 seconds, counting the 10 meters at the start of the sequence and the 10 meters at the start of the level that would make 76 meters. The world record for freediving being 117 meters makes the scene possible. In the game Lara can hold her breath for a minute, but the descent is not counted at the start of the level. It takes about 30 seconds to reach the first air pocket, which makes a total of about 1 minute and 40 seconds of diving. The depth of 76 meters thus seems probable. The Maria Doria is a reference to the Italian liner, the Andrea Doria, which sank in the Atlantic Ocean in 1956. It had a length of 213 meters and a width of 27 meters. It is possible to check these values in the game. The width of the deck is 22 blocks wide. If 22 blocks are 27 meters, then one block is 1.2 meters, which is impossible because Lara would then be too small. According to sources, Lara could measure up to 1.8 meters in this game. This would increase the size of one block to around 2 meters, and the deck would then measure 44 meters. If we keep the proportions of the original ship, this increases it to 347 meters. The longest liner to date is the Harmony of the Seas, and reaches 362 meters long. In 1956 the tallest ship was the RMS Queen Elizabeth, measuring 314 meters. So the game's ship is too big to be realistic, but not that much. The part of the deck visible in the cave is in fact the back of the ship. The location of the pistons, transmission bars and propellers seem to correspond to this assumption. Lara also enters the boat through an opening next to the ink, which is positioned in the bow, just like the cockpit. We also have the certainty that the ship sank in two parts. The first has flipped and is visible in level 40 fathoms, and the wreck. The second part concerns the living quarters and the deck. The two parts are separated by an underwater cave. When we put the liner right side up, it is possible to identify several parts of the ship. At the front is the bridge, below is a room with 3 metal boxes. These could be the ovens to heat the steam and spin the pistons, and these would be raised because of the heat they give off, and could turn around to drain the ash more easily. Nearby there is a large hole which could be the only chimney. We find this collapsed chimney on the roof. You can also see the piston room, then the room that connects them to the propellers. In the boat is a theater, a canopy, a large room, a restaurant, as well as an indoor and outdoor swimming pool. The location of the wreck could be even more precise. Several fish are visible through these levels, the sea bream which is present throughout the Mediterranean Sea, and the barracuda more present in the south than the north. There is also the shark which has the appearance of the porbeagle shark, which has a very wide range. As for the sharks near the wreck, their fins are more like the black-tipped shark that evolves in the Indian Ocean, but this fish has also colonized the southern Mediterranean Sea via the Suez Canal. These sharks prefer shallow coastal waters and can dive up to 75 meters. We know that Gianni Bartoli left Venice with the Seraph, probably to join China aboard his ship, and the shortest way to get there is through the Suez Canal. If we take into consideration all these clues and the geographical reliefs, then the location of the wreck would be somewhere in the eastern part of the Mediterranean Sea, near the Egyptian coast. Once the Seraph in her possession, Lara joins the platform using a buoy, which confirms that the platform is well above and that it is possibly floating. The cutscene shows us that she comes out of the water in the room where the plane is located, precisely where the 5th level begins. Lara steals the plane and escapes to Tibet. But this scene contains many disturbing elements. It is important to put the situation in context because what happens next depends on what our protagonists know. At this point of the adventure, Marco knows that Lara has escaped and that she is carrying weapons. He knows that she has donned a diving suit and he knows that Brother Chang has revealed to her the existence of the Seraph, its location and the fact that it is the key that opens a door to a monastery in Tibet. However, we do not know if he saw her dive, and if he was informed of her actions in the Maria Doria. Most importantly, we don't know if he knows Lara has the Seraph in his possession. In any case, he knows that Lara is alive and the fact that she is a problem for the success of his plan. Marco Bartoli is a dangerous, powerful, informed, and certainly very intelligent man. Is it possible that he still doesn't know he's dealing with the famous Miss Croft? Could he underestimate her? It is improbable. The suspicious detail of this footage is that the station looks incredibly deserted when Lara returns. Several hypotheses could explain it. Maybe Marco ordered everyone to leave the scene thinking his team was going to find the Seraph. Lara was not a problem and he needed maximum manpower for his operation in Tibet. Maybe Lara actually killed everyone and Marco is the only one who left the station in a helicopter. Or maybe the Fiamma Nera left the scene and rushed to Tibet knowing that Lara had found the Seraph. But this hypothesis is unlikely because it would be easier to neutralize Lara on her return to the surface and steal the Seraph. Unless Marco's plan is to trap Lara by getting her on the plane, which is the only way to leave the station. It is also crucial that Lara can make it out alive, because the loss of the Seraph in the open sea would be a disaster. However, another hypothesis is conceivable. Actually, Marco does not care about who will bring back the Seraph to the monastery. His goal is the dagger of Xian. It does not matter who brings back the talion, because that person will necessarily have to go to the gate of Xian, and he knows where that door is. As he didn't know who would come to the surface with the Seraph, he left the seaplane there, for his team, or for Lara. Other details corroborate this hypothesis. First of all, the hangar door is open, as is the aircraft hatch. Lara's clothes that she took off in the cabin at the other end of the base are strangely on the plane. We know this because Lara is on the roof of the plane in diving gear, and that outfit ends up on the plane still wet. Lara is wearing her usual outfit in the same room, and although she could have kept her clothes under the jumpsuit, we've seen her take off her boots previously. It is hard to imagine Lara undressing on the plane and making the entire trip naked, to retrieve her clothes. Then in the cockpit she finds sunglasses, useful in the mountains, but here again they are the same glasses that she usually wears. There is also a woolen jacket, which is not surprising because in a previous cutscene you could see that the plane is probably not air-conditioned, and at altitude it is cold. But the fact that there is only one jacket is more disturbing. The cutscene is also full of details that are not there by accident. Lara starts the engines with the button. These engines idle like an engine of a stationary car. The reverse gear is already activated because the propellers turn to the left, while in flight they turn to the right. This reverse gear is symbolized by the yellow light. The second lever controls the power of the left engine. The third lever is used to manage the power of the two engines at the same time. Because once in flight it is possible to put more power into an engine to compensate for a side wind, for example. The fourth lever controls the power of the right engine. These levers are already positioned to make the plane moves back while spinning. It is intentional because this plane was parked in the hangar in a straight line. The red needles indicate the speed of rotation of each propeller. White needles indicate the amount of fuel for each engine. The second white needle indicates the engine power. Red lights indicate that the motors are active. In this image we see that the left tank is the most full, but also that the left engine is slightly faster, which is coherent because the plane backs up while turning to the right. The most common assumption is that Lara runs out of gasoline because Tibet is simply too far from her takeoff location. If it was the case, that would mean that Marco's men would have put precisely the fuel necessary to get to the monastery, which does not make sense, because the plane would have found itself stranded on the spot. However, it is unlikely that the plane was to land in the mountains, because this is a seaplane that does not seem to have a landing gear. We know this because in a previous level, Lara enters the aircraft from an underwater trap and there is no room for that. This characteristic strongly resembles those of the S-25 Sunderland, which despite its 4 engines, closely looks like the plane in the game. It is a British-designed aircraft with large tanks, capable of flying for 14 hours at best. Its cruising speed being only 285 km per hour, its range of action would be limited to 3,990 km, which is a lot, but insufficient to reach Tibet, which is at least 4,400 km away. As for the distance to the city of Xian de Xiahe, whose temple strongly resembles the one in the game, it is 6,400 km, and is not located in Tibet. Something doesn't fit. Is the location of the wreckage wrong? Unlikely. Is the location of the monastery wrong? Improbable, because the catacombs shelter many snow leopards that live in Tibet. However, it is difficult to estimate the capacity of the tanks. If they are 60% full, this reduces the range of the aircraft to 2,400 km, which would displace the offshore platform in the waters around India. In addition, the French version specifies that the platform is an oil station, as does the English version of the wiki. Oil could stick with this region of the world, but I do not know where this information comes from. It does not appear on the box of the game, nor in the manual. That would not explain either the presence of the sea bream, which does not live in these waters. When Lara takes off, the tanks are 60% full. And since the indicator is still at 60% during the crash, it means that she has used 40% of the full tank, which represents 1,600 kilometers. The only possible explanation would be that Lara refueled the plane on the way. With these indications we can estimate that she landed for the last time on the west side of India, or in a lake somewhere in the Middle East. But India seems more likely because she already knows this region, and she could use the coast as a landmark. As the tank was also 60% full when she took off from the platform, she could not reach this place directly, so she must have landed before, at a maximum of 2,400 kilometers from the platform, somewhere in the Caspian Sea, or in the Persian Gulf. Moreover, if we consider that the missing 40% when she left were used to bring the aircraft to the platform, this moves the platform close to Greece. The idea that an adventurer like Lara Croft could neglect fuel in such a dangerous environment is absurd, just as it would be pointless for an alarm to go off when the tank is dry and not before. Lara is clearly surprised, which would not be the case if she had anticipated the failure with the previous alarms. We know that the needles on the right do not represent the tank because they move suddenly when the engines stop. We can also notice that the plane exploded strongly during the crash, something difficult to explain with dry tanks, but the plane could also contain oxygen cylinders, whether for diving or altitude in the mountains. Except that these bottles are only needed at extreme heights, unless the monastery is surrounded by mountains they would be unnecessary. So, what is causing the crash? The first alert is the flashing light which indicates a problem in addition to the alarm. The sudden stop of the two motors follows, which is confirmed by the two lamps below the dials which are now off. Are the essence indicators malfunctioning? Unlikely. Just as it is unlikely that the two tanks will be empty at exactly the same time. Unless there is only one tank located in the passenger compartment and the problem is with the injection pump, if this pump stops, the engines are no longer supplied, and stop. We can also see flames around the engines when the wings break, indicating the presence of traces of fuel there. Could the fuel have frozen before reaching the engines? Improbable, because it freezes at a temperature below -45 degrees Celsius. The Himalayan mountains are a cold region, but not that cold. This aircraft is capable of flying at 5,400 meters, and eternal snow appears at 4,800 meters. There remains the hypothesis of the obsolescence of the aircraft. The last manufacture of this model dates back to the end of the 60s, and the story takes place in 1997. Could a part connecting the engine to the cockpit break? A part that would have caused the engines to stop? We may never know. Anyway, the explosion is too big for a supposedly empty plane. What we do know, however, is that a parachute was present on the plane. Again, one parachute in a plane capable of landing on water. Without this parachute, Lara could not have landed the plane in the mountain without risking dying during the landing. In the event that Marco planned for Lara to retrieve the Seraph, could it be possible that he intentionally put this parachute on the plane? Let's consider that the monastery is actually located somewhere in the Tibetan mountains. We know that its basements are home to the Talian catacombs and the ice palace. If this palace has not melted for centuries, it is probably because it is located in the nival state of the Himalayas, an area cold enough for sheltering eternal snows. So, above 4,800 meters in this region. Nevertheless, there is liquid water in the catacombs, which is not compatible with this hypothesis. We know that it is water because fish live there. The ice palace could then be located in one of the many glaciers on the sides of the mountains. Rongbuk Monastery is the highest in the world and is located 5,000 meters above sea level in Tibet. The design of the monastery corresponds to the architecture of Xian de Xiahe, which rests at 3,000 meters. When Lara escapes from the ice palace, we can see vegetation and especially fir trees, which corresponds to the subalpine level of the mountain, between 3,000 and 3,900 meters in this region. That said, the average altitude of the whole Tibet is 4,900 meters. The regions that could interest us are numerous and concern the spaces between the mountains where the water flows. The seaplane piloted by Lara has a flight ceiling estimated at 5,400 meters, but the eastern border of Tibet has a relief that often exceeds this height. The cutscene indeed shows us clear evidence. If Lara is flying close to the ground, it is because she simply cannot fly higher. When we look at the map, the probability that Lara reached eastern Tibet becomes very low. Even if she knew the region, only a few roads allow her to cross these mountains. The most likely location of the monastery would then be in the far west of Tibet. As strong as she is, it is unlikely that Lara would have found the monastery with the only clue that it is in Tibet. But Marco Bartoli has this information. What if he had indicated the location inside the plane? The ice palace contains a creature that is half man and half eagle. It could be a Garuda, a mythical creature from Buddhist mythology which first appeared in India. The Tibetan name for Garuda is Xian. In the game, this beast protects the talion, which is the key that leads to the dagger of Xian. The dagger that allows Bu to transform into a dragon. The origin of the dragons is confused, but this one seems very inspired by the Nâgas, the natural enemies of the Garuda. These creatures are snakes of water and earth, described as living in luxurious palaces decorated with precious stones. They are the guardians of the vital energy of the waters, but can also cause destruction by fire depending on the cycle of the universe. The game's dragon spawns in a huge jade palace filled with water and breathes fire. The Garuda and the Nâgas are also immortal creatures, but not invulnerable. At their death they are reborn like the phoenix. And it turns out that this is a characteristic of the dragon in the game. When Lara enters the ice palace, she has beaten her opponents. There are no human enemies in this level. What happens next is interesting. Lara is approaching their camp, but she has no means of transport yet. Her opponents know it and are waiting for her to retrieve the artifact. As proof, we can see that she is immediately chased in the middle of the night by the leader of the Chinese clan. Such stubbornness can only be explained by the need to recover the talion. What is curious is that Lara once again finds a vehicle ready for use, with the keys inside. If the hypothesis that Marco uses Lara from the beginning is confirmed, it is not impossible that the presence of the key is intentional, and that he is already on his way to the Temple of Xian. Here again, Lara has no trouble finding her bearings in the middle of the mountains. We do not know how close Marco is to the Chinese mafia, just as it is not sure that the character in the truck is their leader. Yet this is quite possible since the cutscene emphasizes his character, just like the game menu. The idea that Marco uses and helps Lara from the start is only a hypothesis, but it could be the common thread of the story. This hypothesis can explain why Lara goes to China initially. Marco is in competition with the Chinese mafia and needs to speed up his research. Who better than Lara for this task? This explains why the guard reveals the name of his leader.
And which one is that?
Marco Bartoli!
Why would he have done that if he had the opportunity to kill himself immediately? This guard had a mission: convince Lara to participate without arousing suspicion.
Somehow, you don't behave like you got the monk's blood.
If he had just asked Lara to help them, she could have refused. With this staging and the data on the computer, it was certain that Lara was going to go to Venice. Isn't it strange that Marco takes off precisely after Lara arrives on the plane? The fact that he does not comment on the carnage his troops have just suffered, the fact that he mistreats the pilot as if his usefulness is coming to an end. The fact that he asks the guard in the hold if he fixed the chain, as if it was a code to verify that Lara had been neutralized.
Heroes, have you fixed that rail yet?
The fact that he doesn't kill Lara after her actions in Venice. The fact that Lara's pistols were left on the plane. The fact that Lara finds herself in front of a closed door in order to force her to signal her presence by walking in the water.
Okay, Marco?
Letting Chang tell Lara everything there is to know, the fact that the interrogation takes place in the wetsuit room, the fact that the access door to the dive station opens, the fact that he takes action just when the submarine starts up, as if to entice Lara to join it. The hangar door left open, the plane with Lara's clothes inside, sunglasses, a jacket and a parachute, the keys in the car. And especially the fact that Lara is the first to enter the Temple of Xian, the temple she drives to from the mountains, when she is not supposed to know where she is. Marco knew the temple was trapped, a perfect opportunity to get rid of Lara. The only flaw in his plan is that Lara survived the temple trap. What turned his palace into his tomb? The Temple of Xian in the game is bound to be under the Great Wall of China. In the real world there is the city called Xian, composed of two words which means the peace of the West. This city is very far from the Great Wall. Xian was the eastern terminus of the Silk Road, the ancient trade route that connected China with the Mediterranean and Venice. The city has a very well preserved 14 kilometers wall, but it does not look like the one in the game. Its architecture, on the other hand, is similar to the Temple of the Floating Islands. The Great Wall is a gigantic structure. Some parts of the wall are much older than others and no longer exist today. The best element we have in the game is the relief of the terrain. The area where Lara is located seems arid to say the least. One of the historical sites located in Jiaguan contains remains of this very old wall. The city is at an altitude of 1660 meters, and the terrain looks like what we see in the game. An interesting point is that Jiaguan is at 3,900 kilometers from the Caspian Sea. Maybe Lara was planning to land in the snow, on a lake or a river, find the Talion, then take off again, then land by parachute at the Temple of Xian, since she knows where it is. One of the oldest mysteries in the game is whether or not the floating islands are real. For some they are located on the site of the Temple of Xian, therefore under the Great Wall of China. For others they are somewhere in a spiritual world. Once again these two versions can be explained by the translations. In the majority of languages, they are floating islands, not flying or levitating. Something which floats necessarily does so in a denser substance. But in French, the level is translated into the islands of the sky, the capital letter for the word sky refer to heaven. The simplest explanation is that this is a parallel world, like the spirit world in Avatar, which is accessed through a portal, because the start of the level does not explain why Lara starts the level on an isolated temple. On the other hand, she emerges from the exploding temple. The dragon's lair is certainly there because the palace door, which is closed, is visible in the last room of the game. Lara enters through another access. Xian written in one word is a type of administrative subdivision in China, and it is also the name of a concept of immortality in Taoism. The Xian is a fantastic being with supernatural powers and cosmological dimensions, whose state transcends the opposition between life and death. The shape of the character Xian indicates that the original immortals lived in the mountains, or on mountainous islands. One of these islands is called Fangzhang. On this island resides the governor of the waters who governs the gods and aquatic animals including dragons and snakes. One can attain the state of immortal by shedding one's body at the time of death like a serpent from its remains, but the most gifted people metamorphose and rise to heaven during their lifetime. The floating islands also exist in the real world. It is a mass of floating aquatic plants, mud, and peat ranging in thickness from several centimeters to a few meters, a common natural phenomenon that is found in many parts of the world. Technically it's also an iceberg, and the name of a dessert made from sweet eggs in France. The places visited by Lara contain many details about the local culture. For example, the prayer wheels are important elements in Tibet. There is also the symbol of the eyes of Buddha. These eyes look in four directions to symbolize his wisdom and omniscience. The belief is that the material eyes look at the external world. The Buddhist religion does not exclude the possibility of reincarnation. Several details of the game refer to it. The most obvious is the dagger. But on closer inspection, Lara does not face any human enemies in the Temple of Xian. Why would animals defend a temple? Could this be a metaphor of reincarnation? This hypothesis also extends to the first level located at the entrance of the temple. The door is guarded by two T-Rex, and we find in the pit two human skeletons. The curious detail is they are in one piece. These two humans were decomposed there without the T-Rex moving the bones. The T-Rex are not the only supposedly extinct animals to be found here. There are also the tigers which even in 1997 no longer existed in the area. What do they eat to survive? The answer: they don't. Another subtlety is the fact that Lara only confronts spiders in these two locations, and these spiders have a color looks like the cult costumes. The guardian of the Talion is also half human, half animal, just like the Yetis. Inside the Temple of Xian we can find a room with ghost warriors. What if these temple defenders continue to protect it through animals? This room harbors the door that opens with the dragon seal. A seal is defined as a device or substance that is used to join two things together so as to prevent them from coming apart or to prevent anything from passing between them. The thing that could travel between the two worlds could be life, the life Marco had to sacrifice to gain his powers. The power of the dagger is actually rather poor, twice the dragon was quickly defeated. However, what is really dangerous is the conflicts it generates. Lara had the wisdom to grab it without using it. In a way, by the end of the game, Lara became the guardian of the dagger. That's why she doesn't hide. That's why Brother Chang trusted her, and that's why her character pleases so much. Lara is not a simple tomb raider. She is
The true detox of evil.
When we analyze each sequence, we can estimate that the adventure extends over 10 days. When Lara arrives in China, it is daylight and the sun is high in the sky. Then we do not know how long it takes to get to Venice, but it is at least the next day, because it is still daylight. At the end of the level, the big clock indicates 12 o'clock. Night fell on his arrival at the opera house, and we saw all his journey through Venice. On the next shot, where the plane arrives, at the offshore rig, it is daylight and cloudy. The shadows seem to indicate that the sun is rather high in the sky. This is one more element which suggests that the platform is not in the Adriatic Sea, because at its normal speed this plane would cross this sea in 2 hours and 30 minutes, not enough for the sun to move so much. This is even more obvious in the alpha version of the game. But if the supposed position of the platform is the Mediterranean Sea located at a distance of 1,600 kilometers from Venice, this increases the duration of the flight to around 5 hours and 30 minutes, which seems more coherent. Lara wakes up, we know it's the sunrise and not the sunset, because it's daylight when she dives and you can see all the action she performs on the platform. Then come the events in the wreckage of the ship. It is impossible to estimate how long Lara took to rise to the surface. Given the time change between the 3 levels in Venice, let's say that she stayed there for a maximum of 24 hours. On her return to the platform it is daylight, she steals the plane and heads for Tibet. With this type of plane it takes at least 15 hours to reach its destination, but during its crash it is always daylight. Obviously she advanced about 5,000 kilometers to the east. During this time the Earth also turned in the same direction, but in 15 hours the surface moved 25,000 kilometers. As 1 hour corresponds to a trip of 1,666 kilometers, she only delayed her race by 3 hours, insufficient to do everything in one day. This element corroborates the idea that she did stop to refuel. Everything that happens in the monastery and in the catacombs takes place during the day. Once the talion is in his possession, it is dark. We do not know how long it takes Lara to reach the temple of Xian, but it is daylight. Once the dragon was defeated, she passed out in the evening. She wakes up in broad daylight near the wall. The last level takes place in England overnight. It is unlikely that it will be the same day. In 10 days, Lara met a total of 39 types of enemies. Among the 39 types, 20 of them are human, which represents 497 enemies in total. The total number of items is 516. There are 58 small metapacks and 43 large metapacks, for a total of 48 secrets. 336 items are ammunition and 25% of them relate to Uzi. There is also more grenade launcher ammunition than automatic pistol ammunition. This graph shows the proportion of ammo for each level. We notice that those for the Harpo are only available in the aquatic levels. Also half of the shotgun ammunition is in the last level. These data give us the possibility of evaluating the relative difficulty of each level. Here is the list of enemies classified by rank. It is of course subjective. S for enemies capable of killing Lara in one hit. A for enemies that kills you very quickly on the slightest touch. B for dangerous enemies. A well-placed snowmobile shot can kill Lara from a distance. She can also get run over, but her own snowmobile prevents this. I put the Yetis in rank C because they can pass obstacles in addition to being fast and strong. D. The difference between tigers and snow leopards is that snow leopards are often in groups, but they are not much stronger than tigers. E is for the enemies humans who attack from a distance or able to pass obstacles. The giant spider is here because it has many HP. F for the enemies that take time to reach you, and G for the enemies which do little damage in addition to being very slow. Here is the proportion of these enemies for each level. We notice that the difficulty increases from level 11. A funny point is that Temple of Xian seems oddly peaceful, despite being clearly one of the more difficult levels. But this graph does not take into account the value of enemies. For example, the dragon is a greater threat than a rat. By assigning points to each enemy based on their rank, the graph becomes this. By ranking them in ascending order, we notice that level 16 is the most difficult in terms of enemies, closely followed by the Tibetan foothills. This is due to the presence of many guards. The level with the weakest enemies is level 7, and indeed, the most dangerous enemies of this level are sharks. Nevertheless, all this classification remains incomplete, which is why it is advisable to add the other dangers that can lead to the death of Lara. Here is a list of the most common dangers. Worst of all is the risk of having a fatal fall. The second is the risk of drowning, which necessarily exists as soon as there is a diving phase, even if it is improbable. Any underwater part puts us under pressure and we don't know where to go. Then there is the fire and the pikes. And here is the list of dangers for each level. This is where the Temple of Xian gets extreme. We also notice a peak of difficulty at level 4. But also at level 1, which is not common in a video game. In fact, this first level was used for the demo and had to satisfy the players of the first game while presenting the new features. Here is the ranking of the difficulty of the levels if the game did not have any enemies. The last level is obviously the easiest on this point. It is also difficult to die at Venice. The dragon's lair is strangely in the center because the risk of being burned is high. There are also a lot of pieces of the ceiling which collapses at the end. The Opera House, which is level 4, reaches the second position. This level has many deadly passages in addition to aquatic phases in the darkness, balancing boxes at the end, and many traps. The Barkhang Monastery is in third place because there are a lot of fires, and some really difficult passages. The first level of the game comes in the 6th place, because even if it is very short, it is made up of a very large number of traps. By combining the two graphs, we obtain a new classification. The easiest level remains the last level. The most difficult becomes the floating islands. The Temple of Xian occupies the same place as the Opera House. And the Barkhang Monastery occupies the 3rd place, which is normal because it does not take into consideration the help of the monks. If you hurt them, you will have to defeat them and the level becomes a nightmare. It's the same for the Tibetan foothills. Enemies are easier to kill with the snowmobile, but almost all level jumps can be fatal and you have to go back and forth, unlike the Temple of Xian, which is almost linear. We can also associate this data with metapacks and items. We notice that their number is in abundance until level 8, with a crash at level 9. In other words, it is advisable to collect a maximum of items before level 9 because they will not be more numerous afterwards, while the difficulty is going to increase. Lara killed 68 Venetian gangsters, and 117 thugs on the platform and in the ship, plus 1 if you count the submarine pilot. This gives a total of 186 men working for Marco Bartoli. If we consider the existence of the Chinese mafia, then Lara killed 62 of them, 64 if we add the 2 in the car. Maybe less because some wear the same clothes as Fabio, the pilot of the plane. In total, Lara killed 250 men in 10 days. 215 animals, 24 warriors from another world, and 2 legendary beasts. Now I understand why a clairvoyant mind like Brother Chang thought Lara was a guide from the afterlife. Because she is. This is the end of the video. I won't tell you to subscribe because I never ask that, but any comment would help to promote the video. The new algorithm is difficult and this video is not sponsored. Thanks for the help and thanks for watching.